All right. My name is Dustin Thostenson. I go by Dustinson, one of the people who helps lead up the Iowa.NET user group. Been a longtime person here in the Des Moines area and currently working out at Ford Motor Company through Industrial Logic. The talk tonight is something that I'm kind of interested in. I've been thinking about this type of stuff for a while, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of dig into some of the different failures. I've learned early in my career that an expert is someone who knows all points of failure in a given realm. And the belief is if you know all the ways to fail, the only thing left is success, right? So that's one of the areas I want to talk about tonight. Failure to launch, common consulting crashes. As I've worked in different places, I've learned a lot of things that don't really work when we're trying to consult with other people. I've seen other people engaged in certain ways that didn't really work out that well. Reading books and all that type of stuff. My personal mantra is understand and be understood. It's been something I've been working really hard at, trying to listen to exactly what other people are saying, what they're really thinking, and then trying to find a way to communicate in a way which is easy for other people to understand. So I do ask, I know a lot of you are close friends. I do ask for very close or very honest feedback on this talk as well. This is the first time I've given it. And if you can find recommendations on how I can improve it, I definitely welcome you to bring that to my attention. All right, so the conversation tonight is going to be really around a couple of players here. You've got your consultant and you got the client. And I might be talking about the client interchangeably between a individual, a team, a group of people, or the enterprise as a whole. It's just kind of a generic term. Consultant does not necessarily have to mean somebody whose role is consultant or their title is consultant. I like what Gerry Weinberg defines as consulting. He says, consulting may be defined as the art of influencing people at their request. And I think that a lot of us find ourselves in those types of roles, even if it's, trying to consult one of our peers, our manager, maybe a new hire that's on our team. There's a lot of different ways where we play that role as consultant. And I believe that every time we jump into that type of role, our goal is to be effective. Our goal is to help somebody else. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times I see that not work really well, and it can cause a lot of frustration. So I'm hoping that we can cover some of those things and maybe have some conversations. I'll try to keep my eye on the chat as well, but feel free to take yourself off mute and interrupt me whenever. We can have a conversation around this for sure. A lot of the topic tonight is going to be around a really simple diagram here, right? We got our consultant and we got the client on the right. And I find that a lot of it really is this exchange here, right? A lot of the give and take that we have. Before we really dive into that give and take, though, I did want to take a moment to talk about Maslow's hierarchy here, because when we have that give and take, I think it's really important to be aware of those psychological needs that people have. The base needs that we have, food, warmth, etc., and those security needs. I find myself going back to this a lot to address things that might be my needs, and also kind of try to understand where other people are with their needs. Basic concept with Maslow is you cannot address a higher level need until your lower level needs are met. And a lot of us are in different parts of our career. Some of us might have been doing this for a while and had some comfort. Other people might not. And, I've run into people where they've got some security needs. They don't know if they've got enough money coming in to cover the mortgage. They might have medical bills. We have some people who might not sure if they can stay here, right? They might have travel visas and other types of things that they're dealing with. It can be difficult to know where somebody is and what kind of needs and motivations they have. But I think it's also important to get in tune with your own and not just assume things based off of your feelings. So again, kind of that give and take, a little bit of focus over here, focus over there. I find myself coming back to that a lot. What do I want and what do they want? Am I getting too complex? You all right? All right. So we'll start off with a simple question. You can answer in the chat if you'd like. I always like seeing some chat. Why are you here?
I would never miss a Dustinson presentation.
Very, very excellent answers. I thought Scott was moderating, listening to advice. And I am interested to know why people are here. And these are extremely vague questions as well. You know, why are you here? But if there are certain things that you are interested in getting out of tonight's presentation, please feel free to throw those in the chat. I will do my best to try to answer those. And if you don't feel like we're hitting on them, you know, go ahead and bring them up. Make sure to verbalize them. So not only does this address us for tonight, that why are you here, but I also think about that as I engage with a client. You know, when I first start to find out who my new client might be, what they may have to offer, I have to ask myself, it's like, why am I there? Who brought me here? Why did I decide to come? What do I expect to get out of it? Before we get into a lot of the things, get such kind people in our chat. I love it. Thank you, Carrie. One of the things, it's like you have to figure out, like, what is it that you want? And again, this sounds really stupid simple, but I have seen people and myself have failed because we may want something that we're just not going to get. We may be at a spot that we're expecting something from our client that we're not getting. And I think it's really important to tune into that. You know, starting at some of the low levels of Maslow, we got things like money. I mean, obviously, most of us need money. I know some people in the field that really don't anymore. They've found ways to take care of a lot of their financial needs, so that's not a big issue. Some people like to have that belonging. I've selected places to work based on the people who are there. I currently work with a lot of fabulous people, and I love having that that camaraderie. I've had several companies I've worked with where just wonderful people, and you know, that makes it really nice to get out of bed every morning for. You know, some people, they want that esteem. You might go someplace because of the recognition it could bring you. Other people might want to grow people. You might want to make investments into folks and see them grow. Sometimes you go someplace because you want to see results, right? You think you're going to come in there, you're going to change the things, you're going to apply your knowledge, and boom, up and to the right. Technically speaking, the last few clients I've gone to, if I bought their stock when I started and sold it when I left, the stock has gone up. So apparently I'm doing a good job. I think that's the only way to draw that conclusion, right? And finally, you know, that self-actualization, you know, are you at the job that you're at because you want to kind of see the best that you can be? Are you trying to take all the different skills that you've acquired over your career and your life, and you're trying to see, can I do the best with this? It could be all these things. It could be one or the other. It's not wrong. It's just something that you probably should be in tune of. Simon Sinek has got a great book called Start With Why. One of his follow-up books is called Find Your Why. I wouldn't say that it hits quite as hard as Start With Why, but it is somewhat of a workbook. And there's a lot of things where you can kind of dig into it and really tap into what is it that you want. I have thought about that quite a bit, and I realized for myself, right, this is just why I'm someplace, why I'm doing the thing I do. I want to improve the lives of developers. I've been able to work on some really great teams of developers. I've seen what they can do together as a team. And I think that that's fabulous. I believe that every developer deserves to be on one of these great teams where people work together. They've got a challenging problem. They're able to see the satisfaction from their customers when they deliver great solutions. And I think that that comes from a mixture of having some good technical advice and some, good opportunities to implement that, those technical skills. I think it also has to have a really good environment. I think you need to have somebody with this big brown umbrella to protect them from the storm that might hit them. And if you can give people a good environment and give them the tools, sometimes you can see people operating in a team level at such a higher level than what they would as individuals. So I'm not necessarily interested in trying to solve all the problems myself. I've done a lot of coding. I've pushed a lot of solutions. Some of them worked. And I'm a little bit more interested in, helping that greater good, right? Helping to make teams, but that's me. I've thought about what I want. For other people, well, let me jump into this. So I thought about what I want, and then I have to think, like, what is it that I can give? And as I mentioned earlier, I've been a technical person, so I can write some code. I can fix problems. I can code things. I can solve the solutions. I can push the websites and tweak the binaries. We can do that. That's cool, right? That might be something that they need. I've got the ability to maybe improve processes, right? Maybe we see that the way that the work is being done or the way that the teams are interacting could be improved. And we've got some ideas to say, hey, if we just tweaked this, we could get some better flow through the system. Maybe that's something that you could offer. Maybe you got ideas. Maybe you can take a look at the way teams are working, individuals are working, problems are being identified, and maybe you decide, hey, I've got some ideas I can contribute. Or questions. Maybe you don't have all the answers, but you got a lot of good questions, which can help other people think about that, and maybe they can find some new ideas. Or maybe you can give some inspiration. Maybe you can kind of help motivate or tap into something that somebody has that opens them up so they can start finding new solutions. Another thing here that we'll dive into a little bit more is, you've got your emotions, your personality. There is the drama that you can give as well. And these are all different things that you can give to the client and get things back in return, get the money or the admiration, the personal growth, the results. You can give something and get something back. I'll pause there. Does anybody have any questions or things that they'd like to add in here? Keep moving on. Yeah, so ultimately, I think it's important for an individual as you engage to keep that inventory of what is it that you have to offer here? What do they need, and come to that agreement. I know that this is really simple, but I've just seen it too often where people are not taking some of these basic things into account. They get off the assumptions right off the bat wrong, and it's just not a good time. It's not a good fit.
Yeah, so Dustin, I have a question about that. Do you have any tried and true questions to establish things like, definition of done or something like that up front if you're developing a product, or some type of team chartering type questions, which is like, hey, these are all the things that I do when I communicate, because I think communication styles are important. Do you have any go-to baseline methods to establish collaboration is key? We got to understand what we need to build or whatever the need is.
Usually a couple of my biggest go-tos are going to be what does success look like and what does failure look like? I don't necessarily expect somebody to have all the answers, but if they can start giving me some of those guidelines, that usually helps kind of zero in and have a better conversation.
Yeah, I always like to ask, what problem are you trying to solve? Where are your pain points at?
Yeah.
Where can we make it better? If we're sharing. If we're not sharing, I'll shut up now.
No, that's good, Skip. And that actually, I mean, you jumped right into the slide here, Carter. You've got to figure out what they want, right? And that's a lot of watching and a lot of listening. It's a lot of kind of like using your eyes, kind of just sitting back, absorbing what's going on, listening, asking some questions, but really, really trying to kind of listen to where things are. And then also you kind of got to be invited in, right? That's my little theme here for Halloween. You got to be invited in like a vampire in order to work with the teams. Sometimes you got to identify like who brought you in as well too, because the teams might not even want you. Sometimes somebody else is bringing you in.
Yeah, Dustin, I wanted to touch on that. I didn't know if you had anything more to share on that specific bit, but specifically around trust, right? Like trust is, you need to build trust with, with the clients or the customer. And, you may not have that. They may question, your motives, right? They may, think that you may be misrepresenting their needs or your abilities. And so having that rapport and that trust with the customer is very critical, right? To have that. What you have modeled here looks like a OODA loop, as it relates to a feedback cycle in a sales situation or a consulting situation, and having that trust kind of build kind of both ways is, I think, very critical.
What a great point, Nick. I'm actually really curious. Have any of you kind of established consultants ever come in and people are like genuinely fearful you're there to take their job? And what do you do there? I don't know if that's a regular thing, right? Like, but Nick, to your point, it seems like, you bring in the hired guns, like the big guys come in, and the developers that are there could very well be like, I'm gonna be out of a job. I'm gonna get fired because I'm gonna be exposed for what I contribute or something like that.
Right.
I've had those engagements.
That's only when they bring in the two Bobs.
What is it that you do here? I've had it. I've come in and watched the managers around me get fired. And that really sucks because Dustin shows up and all of a sudden people go out, and I had nothing to do with that at all, but they don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, we often see it in like sales engagements where we'll generally, so the products that I work on are particularly niche in a way, and so a lot of times customers will contact us, and in some of those engagements, you'll get on the phone with them, and they'll jump into expectations that don't necessarily align with what the product is. Because they're maybe misinformed, and so I think that's why I think that the trust part is critical. It's, everyone's heard of like a car salesman, the snake oil car salesman or whatever, but building that trust to say, maybe we don't have the right solution for you, helps build engage and helps break down barriers to say, what do you need, and helping them understand kind of where things fit. So I think that constant feedback cycle to break down and build up the trust and get that feedback from the user is super critical.
Yeah. And I'm guessing a lot of that comes with, coming in with a lot more questions and assertions, more curiosity than contempt. I really believe in the whole people don't care what you know until they know that you care. I think about that a lot, and it is so easy to come in and tell them all the things. I want my knowledge to be your knowledge, and I'm just going to try to force it through because that's the most efficient thing that we can do, right? I'll give you all the answers and then we're done and move forward, but it doesn't really seem to be an effective thing. And it definitely doesn't seem to build trust. I like having conversations with people and getting to know them. And everybody has got different issues. You know, people are low on energy. They don't have any good ideas. Their schedule is full. Maybe they're all the testing problems are horrible because they've got slow, brutal tests that are the shape of an ice cream cone instead of a nice pyramid. You know, we've got code issues or infrastructure issues. The app platform is unstable. Maybe people aren't making enough money, or you know, they got spousal issues at home. Their, you know, husband or wife don't love them anymore. They don't know what the roadmap is. They don't feel like they have a clear path where to go forward. I found that when I spend time just talking with people, you really get to know a lot about what's kind of driving them. And it's challenging though, because again, going back to the things that I have to offer, I'm not able to do things with some of that. I can't help somebody with their money issues, right? Like I can't give them a raise, and I'm probably not going to give them a whole lot of money myself. And you got to kind of pick out like what are the things that you can help somebody with.
I've found that I've let myself get, as a contractor consultant, let myself get funneled into companies that need software help, but they also have some sort of dysfunction. and so what they want is some coding to be done, but what they need is to have some of their dysfunctional nature fixed. And that's where a lot of trouble or difficulty ensues. When I was first starting, I wish I had more of that coach mentality. Probably would have had an even better success rate, but
Yeah.
identifying that dysfunction and fixing that can be hard.
Gerry Weinberg's got a quote, despite what they tell you, it's always a people problem. Which really sucks for a lot of us who are in technology, because we want to just, you know, sprinkle a little DevOps, rub some integration tests on it and call it good, but not always so easy.
See, not me, man. I'm like the Amish programmer. I'm like, the only way you're getting out of it is by rolling your sleeves up and attacking it head on.
And, you know, Skip, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is a good lead in. There are things here where we have the things which are in our control and the things which are in our sphere of influence. And there are things that, you know, concern us. And yeah, I've worked with you, Skip. I know that you like to just jump in there and get stuff done. And that's kind of cool, because you will push your boundaries of control. You will question what is in your control, and you will try to push it until somebody gets, you know, until somebody calls you on it. But I don't think that everybody does that. I think that a lot of times, if you ask a manager, what kind of control does your team have? They'll say, oh, they've got all this control. And then when you ask the team, what do you have control over? They're saying, we just can, you know, name our variables and write if statements and for loops. And it's usually in that gap of those expectations that there are things that could be done that everybody's assuming the other person is going to cover.
Yeah, that's why relationships are important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got to be able to talk to people.
But you got to be careful with the relationships too.
Oh, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
If you want to keep a relationship, it's a universal truth that you have to keep working at it. At least I think it is anyway. I don't.
There's something called the drama triangle. And this I found is really interesting when I've been working with people, and it's hard. It's a challenge working with people. I'll work with people and they'll say, man, we can't do this because of this. And sometimes you find people will fall into this victim role where they're the victim and they'll tell you exactly who the persecutor is. And sometimes you want to jump into that role of rescuer thinking, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. So you jump in and, maybe you go after the persecutor. But what's interesting about the drama triangle, this is just kind of a horrible downward spiral. It doesn't end well. It never does. As soon as you go after that persecutor, then the persecutor turns into the victim and you become the persecutor. And these roles keep switching around. So even though you might have really good intentions and you want to solve that problem, you want to fix that problem, to say, hey, quit telling this dev they can't do these things, set my devs free, then all of a sudden it flips around and you can find yourself out the door. So,
Oh yeah. Hey, have you ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People?
does listening to it on Audible count as reading?
Sure, we'll go with that. That's kind of like
Yes,
the
I
new thing I
have.
hear everyone's doing. I still like the touch of a real book, so I still buy books and read them with my
Yeah.
hands and my eyes. But yeah, in there they talk about that too. Like, one of the biggest things you do is like get someone to, think it was their idea.
Yep.
You're kind of like the coaching thing, right? Like you're guiding them. You know what the solution is. You need to guide them to think that, they came up with it.
Yeah. Sometimes,
Oh yeah, I mean, nothing's absolute, right? Only Sith deal in absolutes. And the Jedi, when they say that about Sith.
Fair point.
Sorry, it's my Star Wars humor. That's all I got.
All right. Brandon's calling out boo on that one. One other thing that I've learned, this thing called the ladder of inference. I found that this is really, 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 really powerful and quite challenging. Basically, it's that psychological process where you see at the bottom here, you've got data, something observable, right? Something that was said in a meeting, sent on an email, posted on Slack. There's something happens, and that's on the outside. And inside of our heads, we're going to take that data and decide to select what data we want to use. And we're going to add our meaning to that data, add some assumptions, draw some conclusions, take our own world beliefs and add that to it. And then we're going to take action. So you can usually see what that external data is, and you can see what a person's actions are. And maybe you can understand what your own flow through here is. Maybe you can. And maybe you can try to guess at what this looks like for another individual. But for me, I've learned that I can only control myself. I can't control anybody else. And even controlling myself is quite hard. And I'm still trying to get better in that area. I'm not perfect by far, but at least recognizing this process can kind of be a little bit more helpful. And I mentioned that because as somebody who's been a consultant for a while, it's really easy to get frustrated with what's going on. Well, when we were traveling, me and some of the other people, we'd have dinner together, and it would often turn into kind of a frustration event where people are complaining about the client. And, oh my God, did you see this email? Did you see how they responded? And we have a lot of frustration around that, because quite honestly, the ideas that we have in our head and the solutions that we have in our head are not easily being employed, right? We can't just come in and solve the damn problem. And we get frustrated by it. And sometimes we may blame the client for being dense. These people, they don't get it. They're really screwed up. Man, they really need to do something about it. They need to fix that. It's like, well, they're trying. They hired you. They brought you in to help. So instead of just blaming them because they're not doing the things that you want, you got to figure out a way to say, okay, well, what is it that I can do with that? And that was a good realization for me. Those who know me know I'm pretty snarky, and I enjoy having some fun. but I also know that some of those things aren't really helpful. So I was kind of trying to figure out like, how can I turn that around? Because what I've also learned is, as we mentioned earlier, for the things that you give to the client, your emotion is probably one of the most visible things. And if you hold them in contempt, if you think that they're idiots, if you think that they're incompetent, like whatever that you think about them, this is coming across. It might not be in your words, but they can pick up on it. And I have seen people lose their jobs because of that, because the contempt that they carry for the client comes across loud and clear. And if that's the case, you're not going to be around to help them. And if your intent is to try to help people improve, and you're coming across with a bunch of contempt, you know, it's not going to work. The door is shut.
That's like Dustin, just to interject, but that's there's like another quote that I'd butcher from Weinberg's consulting book, right? But it's something to the effect that you can only provide, you can only improve or provide 10%, to your client. And that goes kind of both ways, like both in what you can give and what they can take from you, and if you try and, to your point, provide too much, they may not accept that.
Yeah. No. And I find this to be especially difficult for some people, especially with some more technical backgrounds, because a lot of the people who are drawn to technical fields are usually a little bit more introverts. They're a little bit more focused on the technology, a lot more logical minded, and sometimes we ignore those types of things. Yeah, so that kind of brings into that whole attraction principle. And we've got a magnet here, or magnet. I'm self-conscious on this word now because I grew up in Minnesota and we call them magnets. And we were in Kingston, Arizona on Route 66 or Route 66, route. And we stopped at this kitschy motel that was, all this Route 66 up on there. I walked in and I said, "Hey, can I get a magnet?" And she looks at me, she goes, "Huh?" I go, "A magnet, like for my fridge?" And she goes, "Yeah, hold on." And she picks up the phone and calls somebody, and guy comes out and he goes, "Hey, I'm Mike. What do you need?" I go, "Do you have any magnets?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Where are they?" He goes, "I'm maintenance." I was like, "No, I wanted a magnet." He's just looking at me. He goes, "Yeah, I'm maintenance." "No, like the thing you stick on your fridge." "Oh," he laughs at the girl behind the counter. "You mean a magnet." And now I'm broken. I don't know what to call it, but
I don't hear the difference.
clearly they did. I don't know. They don't pick up the Midwestern magnet. So yeah. But maybe that's just gonna be my whole talk on magnets. I should have had the Insane Clown Posse icon here. How do they even work? Yeah. Anyways, distraction there. Basic idea here is, you don't know if they're pulling you or pushing you sometimes. And if you're fighting against that, this power dynamic gets to be really, really interesting, because if they're pushing and you're still trying to push against them, things are not going to go well. I've seen this way too many times where if you're brought in to help somebody, or if somebody is enlisting you to help out on something and it's not going the way that you want, people often might try to use kind of some bad power, some dirty power, leverage position power, right? "Do you have any idea how much you guys are paying for me? Your boss wants me to be here." And, so like you try to leverage that organizational power, which, you're just trying to kind of get the compliance out of them because the boss says so, or maybe you've got the rewards that people are going to dangle. Hey, if you do these types of things, it's going to be better. You'll get a bonus, you get the promotion, etc. Maybe you try to leverage that coercive power where, you know, if they don't get on board, they're going to get fired just like the other guy. You know, the resource power of being able to control that access to say, hey, we're not going to give you access to these projects. We're going to do these things. I've seen a lot of people leverage or try to leverage that positional power. And the best that you're going to get out of it is compliance. People might do it for a little bit. And then as soon as that type of power is removed, they're out, right? It does not last. Personal power, on the other hand, I've watched some people who can leverage that. And that's really amazing, you know, when people just like you. I think somebody said something about being nice in here earlier, right? Or Slack. Carter, it's nice to be important, but more important to be nice. Yeah. You know, leveraging the power because people like you, or maybe you've got that expert power. Maybe you've been doing these things a long time and people kind of look up to you because you have these special abilities. You know, maybe you've got that information power where you know a lot of things, or you might be a well-known author. You know, maybe you know a lot of other people, you've got those connections. Those are the kinds of power that will draw people towards you, which are usually more positive powers than trying to force your way through things with that positional power. And again, I didn't know about these things before, and I found myself, you know, in some cases resorting to that positional power, and it would just later on remind me that force is the weapon of the weak. And if I found myself trying to force something, that it probably wasn't going to work long term. And I think for me, it kind of comes down to, you know, plant the seeds to emerge the needs. If you find that the things that you want and the things that they want aren't lining up, you know, meet them where they're at, give them the things that they want and try to help them there, but also start planting some of those seeds about the way that things could be in the future. Give them some of those opportunities. I find this kind of interesting because this is a much, much, much longer play. There's one individual that I had worked with for about 2 years, and finally, you know, they were too busy. They knew how to do all the things. And finally, they started to see some opportunities, and the solutions were very clear because they were listening. They weren't implementing the things at the time because they were too busy. They were relying on doing things the way that they were used to doing it. But they finally found the opportunity where obviously these are all the things that we have to do. And I found that interesting because, like, sometimes you have to hold up that mirror and allow people to see things a little objectively. You know, you can paint the pictures with the colors that they're giving you and the shapes that they're telling you. If you take a look at your own place, especially during quarantine, we might have gotten really comfortable. I mean, you can see here, I've got my dysfunctional Applebee's back here. And even tonight, I actually cleaned it up because I knew that I was going to be on camera with you guys. When I was in college, it was always fun when somebody was going to come over. I thought, all of a sudden you look around, you're like, oh my God, this place is a sty. But you live with it. You don't even realize it. So sometimes just, you know, showing that picture of like, hey, this is what it is. Does this look right to you? People will see it objectively and go, wow, I should probably do something about that. And if you planted some of those seeds and all of a sudden they're coming to you and they're asking for those types of questions, then you can help build them that plan and, you know, give them a clear message with kind of messaging. And that clarity, that's one of those things that I really, really try hard on. And I find that super hard to do.
Talking about like kind of people power, and that makes me think of John Maxwell. He big in the leadership space, talks a lot about influence, and you know, really leadership boils down your ability to influence and get stuff done. And he has a book about 360-degree leadership, talks about leading to the side, leading up, and leading down. But it's fantastic because he talks about, like, you know, how you mentioned plant the seed. He actually brings up like specific instances and techniques and what you can do to, you know, reach that level of trust with people.
Yeah, John Maxwell, that guy has he's got some great advice, and he has been a lifelong student. One of the things that I find a real challenge with, though, is, we talked about getting that big brown umbrella to create the environment for people to succeed. I've spent time with people, and you listen to them, and they're talking about all the reasons why things can't work. And I find that really challenging, because are you not able to grow? Are you not able to achieve your goals? Are you not able to do your best because of your environment? Okay, cool. Let's see what we can do about cleaning that up. Let's get you the new Mac M1 processor so you can finally compile the code base. Let's take care of some of these other issues. We'll fix a pipeline. We'll break apart the code base so it's not a big old monolith. We'll give you enough people on your team. Like, what are those environmental factors which you need to be successful? And then once you have those, does that mean that you will start kind of giving your all and have the highest performing team that you can? Or are there still going to be excuses? And that one gets to be a really difficult challenge for me, because on that skill will matrix, you've got people with high skill and high will. And when you engage those people, you say, great, go do your thing, right? Here's some praise. Here's some new tasks to try to capture, to try to implement, some new goals to set, right? You give them things that they can do, and then they can achieve it, and they can keep building on that goodwill. If you've got somebody with a good amount of skill and not as much will, that's a good opportunity for coaching, right? You kind of take all the good things they have, give them some more praise, give them some direction, try to find some ways to motivate them in a non-coercive way, and maybe you can get a little better results out of the person. Sometimes you've got somebody that really wants to do things, but they just don't have a whole lot of experience. They don't have the skill. That's cool. You can guide that. You can set up ways to work with them. You can find ways to kind of help build their skill up to the point where you can start handing them off and feeling confident that they can take things and run on their own. For the people with that low skill and the low will, though, you got to be really directive with them. And that gets to be a sizable challenge. You can give them the praise when they're doing things well, give them the opportunity to build up the skill, try to find those motivations. But if you don't have those people that are able to go up and to the right, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy. And I find that so interesting with companies that treat any of their people as resources. I find that so amazing, because there is such a need for people with high skill and high will. And the work that they can do it makes such an impact. Having a handful of great people and a great culture, what they can deliver is amazing. If you try to just get low skill, low will people, and you figure that we're just going to throw a bunch of resources at the problem and brute force our way through it, it's going to take so much more time and energy, and the results that you get aren't going to be great. It's definitely not a cost savings manner or a cost savings initiative, but sometimes it can be hard with the accounting to find that, because we've got so much dilution of what's going on. There's just confusion, no real good clarity on that ROI, because we don't even know what kind of outcomes we're trying to get sometimes. So, and sometimes when I see this as well, if I'm finding the people with the low skill and the low will, I resort back to one of the things that one of my mentors told me. He says, you can only coach the people that want to be coached. You can only consult the people that want to listen. Goes back to Gerry Weinberg's consulting is the art of influencing people at their request. If they don't want it, don't waste your time on it. All right. So finally, where do you guys see yourselves in this little follower and leader path here? Blubbers on the front, he says. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of use this as a trick question. I think it goes into that false dichotomy. I don't think it's one or the other. I always find it interesting when they say, is it this or that? I was like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. All these things don't have to be boom leads in our life. You don't have to with us or against us. I think that that if you're trying to help other people find their way, I think sometimes you got to lead and sometimes you got to follow. I think that it keeps changing. So, all right. So in summary, somebody mentioned the problems and solutions earlier. Like I said, I think a lot of this just kind of comes to spending a little bit of time focusing on what your wants are and what their wants and needs are. Trying to get clarity around what the problems that we need to solve are and some clarity around what kind of solutions we're going to employ. And if you're interested in more reading, I've got some books here, just a handful of them. Like I said, The Simon Sinek, Start With Why, Find Your Why. Crucial Conversations, if you're looking for some tips on how to actually have the conversations with people. A lot of talk with Gerry Weinberg tonight. From Contempt to Curiosity with Caitlin Walker. Holy cow, is that an amazing book that just talks about the way that you ask a question, the way that you frame the question that you ask, oftentimes will influence the answer that you get. And just changing the way that you ask a question, being open with them and really listening. There's a lot of things that we don't know. And if we assume that we know, we're going to be fed the things that we expect to hear, and that might not necessarily be the truth, but we'll treat it like the truth. And Esther Derby's 7 Rules for Positive Productive Change, very good book. It's a simple read, but very, very profound and deep. Were there any points here where I was talking through that somebody wanted to jump in with some own personal stories, or does anybody else have anything that they'd like to contribute to the conversation tonight?
You know, something that stood out to me, Dustin, was just the circle of influence, circle of control thing. I've always actually looked for a better way to say it, because I say the serenity prayer, right? Like I say it to a lot of people a lot of the time. You can control what you can. You got to let go of anything that you can't, right? Like,
Yeah,
it is a peaceful state of mind. I've never seen this, so I'm excited to not have to say serenity prayer as much as I do.
good. I learned this a couple of years ago, and we actually did an exercise where we would take the developers all together, and we had the whiteboards or the white sheets of paper, and we drew the circles on there, and we took a handful of different aspects of their job and said, okay, is this something that you have control over? Is this something that you have influence over? Is this something that's outside of your control or influence? And we would have the groups kind of come together and say, yeah, we can decide when we're having a team lunch. We can decide what our team name is. We can decide what our hardware purchase budget is. We can decide how much goes into our sprint. We can decide when we're releasing things. And it was really interesting. And then we did the same thing with managers as well. And very, very interested in seeing the disconnect there. But to have people put it in that context and recognize, yeah, you do. You may have more agency here than you'd like to admit.
Yeah, I just want to add, Dustin, that I put something in the chat that I use these circles for retros very often, especially teams who kind of get stuck in complaining and we can't do anything, and basically victim mode, looking at persecutors, because they start to see that they have choices, and they start to see that, oh, it turns out that there are actually quite a few things here that we can do something about. And if you can just get a wedge in there that they can start to see that they have some autonomy in some part of their work, it can make a big difference for folks.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Good point.
Good to see you, by the way.
Yeah, nice seeing you too. Thanks for coming.
So you mentioned a book that I have yet to read on the Contempt Curiosity. So that got added to the list. So worth the price of entry.
Thanks, Doc.
Yeah.
Speaking of books, I poured coffee all over your books yesterday. So now it looks like it's a real book because it's got the coffee stains on it.
Got coffee all over it. Do you need a, oh, was that one of the original misprints?
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
Oh, no.
It's worth even more
only
now.
5 of them.
Yeah. It's worth even
Hey,
more.
Dustin, I took a couple screenshots of some of the slides. but I
Yeah.
will give a shout out to Diane. I also copied some of the links that she threw out there. So, you did great, Diane. Great stuff too.
Thank you.
Hey, I wanted to mention, we dropped it in the chat as well, but you mentioned the Cartman drama triangle.
Mhm.
And there's a book, I've read it, I don't know, numerous times. It's an easy read. It's called The Empowerment Dynamic. And it is basically the antidote to the drama triangle.
What was it called again?
The Empowerment Dynamic.
TED, basically. Think TED Talks and you'll remember the empowerment dynamic.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something I would certainly encourage you to look at, Dustin, and possibly kind of add in here. I think what you touched on was completely appropriate to what you're talking about, because we fall into these roles as victim, persecutor, and this is just it's a shift in those same roles and how they could be healthy potentially.
Right. If you perceive them in this way, suddenly they become helpful. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen in relationships, but your responses change as a result of your perspective. So anyway.
Kind of essentially like, when you negatively phrase a question, turn it around, right? Like, is that what I'm getting from this?
To a great extent, yeah. If when you can see a persecutor as a challenger, it changes things. You're no longer a victim. You're still in control. And so it's a paradigm shift, if you will. But anyway, it's a relatively easy read. Parable style, a la The Goal, or any of those kind of books. Yeah, Five Dysfunctions, right? That kind of thing.
I had one thing to add.
That sounds like a lot of stuff Tony Robbins talks about.
All of this stuff is stuff Tony Robbins talks about, man.
That is true. He talks about everything. It is true.
I have one thing to add. So I've been a developer for 15 plus years and fairly skilled at writing code and leading teams on the technical side of it. But in the last year, I've moved into a new role where I'm responsible for building teams and actually trying to produce productive teams and dealing with culture barriers across different countries and states and all sorts of other stuff. And, Dustin and I have had for years, lots of conversations around influencing people, both as a consultant and as a team lead and a tech lead and all sorts of other things. And I'll say that, Dustin's, the quote he said at the beginning is one I like to use a lot, which is like an expert, somebody who knows all points of failure in a system or a realm. And I think one thing that sometimes we forget is there needs to be a lot of grace in this process, because I think one of the things that we sometimes forget is that there are people involved, and that we have to realize that manager is probably was formerly a product person or was formerly a developer or something like that. They're actively learning, and you can't just come in and say, go do exactly this. They have to learn and try things and see what fails to ultimately know what doesn't work. And I think sometimes we forget that that person may be learning themselves, and you have to give them grace as they work through that process. As we're growing this team that I'm on, we try things, stuff doesn't work. We go back, we reflect on it in retro. But the interesting thing I've noticed, at least over the last 9 months, is that the retro topics that come out of what to change, stop doing or start doing, have never been the same things retro to retro. And I think that means that the team is actively growing and maturing and norming and performing. And I don't have triangles and circles and things like that at my that I'm not pulling from, but I do have experience as a developer. And I think the one thing too is that as a leader, though, is you have to also be the one to put yourself out there first and be the most vulnerable. And sometimes people respond well to that and are willing to be vulnerable themselves. So putting out here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, here's what I'm not good at, here's where I need others from, and also, every one-on-one I have, I always end it with, how can I be better and how can I serve you? And sometimes it's like, hey, I just need a new monitor. But sometimes it's like, hey, you need to change your behavior here because it's impacting my ability to be successful. And I've been managers who don't respond to that and who don't change, and it's demoralizing. But if you're a leader who actually listens to your people and changes and tries to improve and get better, people respond to that really well, and you'll see growth in the people around you. And again, I'm not an expert. I don't have books written. I don't have diagrams or any of that stuff. I'm just pure personal experience and what I've experienced over the last 9 months. And Dustin can probably tell you like how I've talked about the team and growth has changed in the last 9 months. But this is hard. This like dealing with people is very hard. Solving engineering problems is super easy by comparison. So like I just want to throw that out, like especially if you're a coach or you're on the receiving end and you're dealing with a coach, like just have grace for those around you because we're all learning, right? So
Hey, Brandon, I want to yes and your statement, especially that question that you ask at the end of every one-on-one. I think that's super powerful. I think for any of you that are considering doing that, be prepared. The first few times you ask that question, they probably won't tell you anything. Then they'll give you something light and it sounds a little bullshitty. Whatever it is, handle it. And from then on, they'll start to actually tell you what's happening for them. Most folks won't come out of the gate answering that question honestly, but you keep asking it and you respond in accord and it will dramatically improve the relationship.
It reminds me of the Ted Lasso episode where they complain about the shower pressure and they fix the shower pressure and it tips toward knowing that they have an ally.
Yep.
That's it.
Or you have a person on your team who just flat out tells you like stop doing this, right? And they
some will, yeah, some will, but many. But
sometimes you get lucky there.
Yeah, some will, but many won't because they've been inoculated into an environment where their complaints are never heeded anyway. So it takes a while to build that trust sometimes.
Yeah, it's all good steps towards building psychological safety within the environment. Like that's the big thing that we try and drive where I'm at is like getting people to talk, being people to be transparent, getting people to be open, moving towards decision making, right? Empowering those around you who are experts in what they do. And like we had a retro today where it was just like, hey, people list out like what's your strengths and weaknesses, right? And then what we did is we took people within the team and said, hey, your strengths offset this person's weakness. And what's funny is when you see how people actually work and how people are really good at self-reflecting on their own strengths and weaknesses. And then when you can start seeing like, hey, this person's strength's my weakness and my weakness is their strength, all of a sudden now you start building new relationships with people. It's really fun to actually see it in action, actually watch as the team grows and starts bonding and growing together. Like it's actually really rewarding to watch that aspect of it. So
I've got one last question. And as some of you who've been to these meetings know, we usually will give away a JetBrains license, so you can get IntelliJ or ReSharper, etc. We've got a license, and usually we do a drawing for it. But tonight, I'm going to ask a question. How many mugs did I drink out of tonight? Go ahead and throw your guess in the chat here. I'll give you a few seconds. We get 7, 2, 1, 4, 4, 5.
I just want to say, if you try to pull I didn't actually drink through any mugs, I drank from a glass, I'm going to reach through the screen and hit you.
The answer is 10.
Whoa!
This was your
You're doing dishes tonight, right, Dustin?
My wife is gonna be so pissed.
Wait, was there like whiskey in all of those? Like what?
I don't know what you mean. Scotch. No, 10 mugs of water and 10 vessels. So it looks like Diane and Doc won the JetBrains license for tonight. So Carter, thanks again for the continued support of the user group with Source Allies. Great ally here. Thank you all very much.